Okay, hello and welcome to another edition of the Stanion and Northants Astronomy Club's Skyguide. So this Skyguide will be for the month of July, year 2020, and will relate to UK skies. So just about anyway, around the Midlands of the UK, this will be relevant for. So as usual, I will start off with the planets. So I'm going to show you where you can see just about all the planets this month, for a nice change. So I'll kick off with Mercury. So Mercury is now becoming a morning object from the 1st of July. It rises in the northeast, but it will be best viewed in the last 2 weeks of July, so the second half of July. Because it will be above the horizon a bit longer before sunrise. So it's just a challenging object in the early hours of the morning. See this screenshot here? Oh, I hate this when it comes up. Right. So yeah, so what I was saying, it's a challenging object in the early hours of the morning, as you can see from this screenshot here. This will be 4:15 in the morning, on the morning of the 19th of July. When Mercury will be joined by a very thin waning crescent moon, which may make locating the planet a little bit easier. That pair always make a nice view in the morning. And just another bit of information as well, it reaches greatest western elongation on the 22nd, so that's its greatest separation to the west of the sun. Next object, after seeing Venus in the evening skies, for the last few months, it's now disappeared from the evening skies, but re-emerges now into the morning skies. So as you see here on the 3rd of July, this screenshot here shows you, where it would be in relation to the horizon in the early hours. So this is like 4 o'clock in the morning. You'll be able to see it, and all month Venus is going to be shining away at about mag minus 4.3, and which makes it a very bright object in the early hours. And I've got another couple of slides here, show you some more things about Venus. So from the 3rd of July, it will present a 20% crescent if you look at it through a telescope. But then by the end of the month, see on this second screenshot I've got on here, it will be illuminated up to 41%. So if you can see it, most mornings during July, you'll see this, the shape of it slowly changing. Just like we see the phases of the moon, we can see phases changing with Venus. A fairly rapid period of time, really. So an interesting thing to look out for there. Here's another image of Venus taken by our friend Dave Eagle. He's been very obsessive, taking lots of images of Venus lately, and you can really see the change in its phase as it was in our evening skies, and now he's started to do the same as it's come back into the morning skies. And of course, if you know what you're doing, you can take an image of Venus or see Venus in the daytime, but you've got to be very careful when the sun's above the horizon, of course. So if you've got the right equipment and you know how to stay safe, by not pointing your scope directly at the sun, then it is possible to see Venus. But of course, I recommend you really find out how to do it safely first, though. Do have a little look at Dave's website, stargazing.co.uk. Got lots of great information on there about different things you can do astronomy-wise, and the things that he's doing as well. He's got a planetarium, and he's been putting on a lot of great Zoom virtual astronomy meetings on lately. So I recommend a visit to his website and see if there's anything that interests you there. Another thing happening with Venus as well this month is it does pass through Taurus and the Hyades star cluster as well. And on the 12th of July is Venus will be lying quite close to the brightest star in Taurus, Aldebaran. So that's the red supergiant that resides in Taurus. Venus will be very close. So if you're out and about in the early hours of the 12th of July, you can look up and see Venus very close to that bright star. So moving on now to Mars. It's rising in the east from midnight, and it will gradually get brighter from mag minus 0.5 to about minus 1.1 over the month. And on the 12th of July, it will be very close to a waning crescent moon. So it's a kind of a decent sort of altitude, so you can get a good view of Mars in the early hours throughout July. Moving on now to Jupiter. So at mag minus 2.6, shining very nice and brightly in the early hours right now. Now, if you might have noticed this, if you've been up in the early hours of the morning, you'll see Jupiter shining quite brightly. Then next to it, also in the south, you'll see Saturn. And on the 6th of July, Jupiter and Saturn are joined by a just almost full moon. This screenshot here was about 2 in the morning, 6th of July. So, going the evening of the 5th of July, going into the 6th of July, you should be able to see this nice triangular little conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon. And also, Jupiter reaches opposition on the 14th of July, which means that the Earth, the Sun, and Jupiter are in like a perfect alignment, so it appear the brightest it will be all year. And of course, when Jupiter is at opposition, around this sort of time of the year, there'll be lots of opportunities to see transits and occultations of the Galilean moons. And here's a couple of images that I took some years ago. I think this was the transit of Io's shadow. You can see the great red spot here, but this black dot on Jupiter's disk is actually the shadow of one of the Galilean moons. And this image on the left is just the where I took this crop from. But yeah, you can see the moons captured in this image as well. And one of these moons is casting that shadow onto the planet. So there's plenty of opportunities to see that throughout July. And moving on now to Saturn. I just mentioned you can see Saturn just to the left of Jupiter, when you're viewing that in the early hours. So it's rising just after Jupiter in the late evening as darkness falls. You can see them rising over in the east. But the best view when they're due south, they'll be at their highest point in the sky. I think they're going to be around about 20 degrees high, which isn't too bad, but you can still make some fairly good observations if you like. Saturn also reaches opposition this month on the 20th, and the good thing to look out for when Saturn reaches opposition is the Seeliger effect, which is as Saturn's rings come into opposition, the shadows that are normally cast onto the ice crystals from other particles in the rings, that effect isn't seen as much when it's in opposition, and so the rings can appear to get brighter over the few days before opposition, and they'll be brightest when they're at opposition, and then as you come into the next few days after opposition, they'll slowly get less bright, but you should be able to see them dim slightly afterwards. So it's another nice thing to look out for if you're lucky enough to get out and observe Saturn a few nights on the trot around this opposition. Of course, Saturn's rings never fail to impress, however bright they look. And this is an image I took several years ago now, and I was really pleased to capture the Cassini division there. That dark region, the separation between some of the rings of the planet, and I also managed to get quite a lot of banding detail in this image as well from Saturn. So yeah, always a pleasant view, even if you're just looking through an eyepiece, or if you manage to take some photos, you can get some good views of Saturn. Also, Uranus and Neptune will be visible this month as well, so you can just about see all the planets throughout this month. Uranus and Neptune are going to be in a similar sort of part of the sky as Mars. So in the early hours of the morning, if you can see Mars, somewhere over to the left of Mars will be Uranus, and I think it's in the constellation here, just off to the left of Pisces. I haven't put any detailed finder guides on here. I think you can go and look for them yourself if you're really interested. I always find them a bit tricky to locate these planets, to discern them from the stars surrounding. Yeah, this will be the view on the 20th of July, and also I've done the same on 20th of July for Neptune as well, which is over to the right of Mars. So also a little bit tricky to discern from its surrounding stars, but yeah, if you know where you're looking, if you get yourself a nice finder chart, you can pick out Neptune. It'd be nice to try and get all the planets in one observation sitting, which may be possible this month, if a little bit challenging. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some deep sky objects now. I'll put a couple in here that you might want to have a look at throughout July. This first one I've highlighted is NGC 7023. It's known as the Iris Nebula, and it's located in the constellation of Cepheus, which is due north at around about midnight, this sort of time of the year. And you see the house asterism that makes up Cepheus. So you take the two stars of the right side of the house, if you like, and you kind of make almost a right angle triangle with this bright star here and this one here. That's where you'll find the Iris Nebula. So there's a bit more of a detailed sort of finder there for you. I think my scope, I could just about make it out with the naked eye using my telescope. Using a bit of averted vision, you can make out the dusty cloud that surrounds, that makes this nebula, sorry. And here's an image I took of it a few years ago. I really had to bring the curve up a little bit just to get a little bit more detail out of the clouds, which is kind of illuminated by the central star, as you can see there. Yeah, it's quite a nice object to photograph, and also a nice one to tick off if you're making visual observations. So the next object I'm going to highlight is one of my favourites during the summer. When you see the summer triangle of Deneb, Vega and Altair, the three stars of these constellations that are visible almost constantly through the summer. Almost in the middle, just off centre of the big summer triangle, is you'll see the star at the head of the Swan of Cygnus. And this star is known as Albireo, which is actually a double star. Here's a picture I took a couple of years ago of this double star. As you can see, the colours contrast quite nicely, and they really looks nice just through the eyepiece with the naked eye as well. So it's a nice little showpiece to show people if they're having a first go on a scope, if they want to see something really interesting, really beautiful through a scope. So one star is a nice bright red colour, and the other star is also it's a blue colour, so nice contrasting stars. I think for years they were thought to be a binary star gravitationally bound to each other, but I think since the launch of the Gaia mission, I think it's now been concluded that they're a line of sight double rather than being in the same star system. But I think we'll still consider them a double star, as we have done for so many years. Yeah, a really nice pair to observe. A comet I'm going to highlight this month as well. I'm going to go for C2020 F3 Neowise, which is a parabolic, I think it's on an orbit of a parabolic orbit. Now this one, it will be a challenging spot, but it is supposed to be brightening up quite a lot recently, although it is very close to the sun at the minute, and I think tomorrow, which will be July the 3rd, it's going to reach perihelion, which is its closest point to the sun. And for this comet, which it is 0.29 astronomical units, which is about a third of the distance that we are from the sun. So you can see here on this diagram how this is the orbit of the comet coming in. It's when it's going to reach its closest distance to the sun. So when it comes out the other side, it may be visible in the morning skies here. Later in the month, though, as it just passes through the bottom of Ursa Major here, and you can see here from the mag prediction, I think you're supposed to get about mag 0, which is well in the naked eye realm. So if you're lucky enough to get a low horizon, you can see Ursa Major in the later half of July. It might be possible to see this comet. It's well worth keeping an eye out on these things. It's quite unpredictable. And this all is, of course, if it survives its trek around the back of the sun. Because sometimes when comets get so close to the sun, they can break up and just dissipate into nothing. But one to watch out for, definitely. Comet Neowise. This is from the app that I use on my phone, this screenshot here, and you can see this is the horizon along the bottom, and I've plotted a little track on here that Neowise will take throughout July. And as you can see here, here's Ursa Major, and it will be quite low in the northwest. About midnight this will be, so it'll be as dark as it can be this time of the year. So, but if it is a bright comet, as we've all got our fingers crossed for, it may be possible to see something with the naked eye against the horizon. So fingers crossed. Keep your eye out for that one. Another thing visible this time of year is noctilucent clouds. So from late May until early August, these ghostly, wispy, electric blue clouds are visible, usually around about an hour and a half, 2 hours after sunset in the northwest sky, or an hour and a half to 2 hours before sunrise in the northeast sky. Now this animation here was taken by one of the Stanion Northants regulars, Titch Wykes. He took this from Northants in the UK, and I think he took this animation was over about an hour. As you can see, noctilucent clouds are quite a dynamic phenomenon to watch this time of year. As the sun's angle gets just right, it illuminates these ice crystals that are very high in the atmosphere, and you need that angle to be able to see them. And you can see how they change over the course of about an hour in this animation of Titch's. And the ice crystals, I believe that they're seeded by the dust that's left in our upper atmosphere, and a lot of this dust may come from meteorites or meteors, sorry, as they break up in our upper atmosphere. So, a really interesting thing to see. And I think this is a more of a wide field view that Titch had of the noctilucent clouds. You can see how they change. And as always, astronomers are fighting against the weather, especially in the UK. I think he finally lost out against the clouds, but I think Titch has done really well to capture these images so nicely. Okay, I'm going to move on now to the International Space Station. Ignore that bit of writing at the top, I forgot to modify that, but you can see the space station coming over the UK all throughout July. It starts off in the very early hours in the morning, so we've got some nice passes here. At the 6th of July, we've got one at 4 in the morning, which is 64 degrees at its highest point, so a nice high, and also a very bright pass, almost as bright as the planet Venus. It will pass over in the early hours of the 6th of July. And as you go out on through July, I think the passes get a little bit earlier, maybe creeping up to about 11 o'clock-ish or midnight sort of times. So well worth getting the ISS detector app or looking at heavensabove.com to see exactly when you'll be able to see the space station passing over. Don't forget to give those astronauts a wave as you can see them passing over. And I'm going to finish off now showing a few images from some of the members have submitted that I can include, just to show what some of us get up to, even even in the summer you can still take some nice images. So Graham Albireo has been doing a bit of solar observation. He's been taking some captures using his 200p Newtonian telescope fitted with a Barda filter, so it's a white light filter. And the sun's been very quiet lately, and Graham was lucky to see a sunspot emerging around the sun's limb. So it's quite a rare occurrence these days to see a sunspot on the sun. But he's took a really nice couple of captures here. I think the full disc was at prime focus, and then he's used a Barlow lens as well to get closer in, and take this really nice image over here that you can see on the left of the sunspots. Actually, a group of 3 sunspots there, and you can see the a bit of activity there on the surface of the sun as well. A really nice capture. Move on now to John Allen. Another chap who comes down to the Stanion Club, and he's captured the Omega Nebula, which is in Sagittarius. And this is quite a challenging object to image from the UK as well, as it's quite low in the south, so you need to capture it when it's at its relatively highest point, as we see it from here. You can probably see from the shape of this nebula, it also has the name of the Swan Nebula, I believe. You can see there's the swan's back and its neck, and maybe the head on the top there. So John also uses a Skywatcher 200p telescope. It's got a DSLR camera on there as well, and it's got that sitting on top of a nice hefty NEQ6 Pro mount, which really gives you a nice stable base to take some good images with. 40-second exposures he used at ISO 1600. That's the settings that he used, and that was a few weeks ago on the 13th of June. So really nice object to observe and to image too. Moving on now to Paul Smith. He took a picture of the Eastern Veil Nebula, so it's part of the supernova remnant that resides in the constellation of Cygnus. He says its distance is 1,470 light years away, so this is how we're seeing it now, how it was 1,470 years ago. So that's how long the light took to reach us here. So now, even though it's got a magnitude of 7, I think it's a relatively low surface brightness, or it's so dispersed, it's very hard to see visually through a telescope, unless you've got very, very dark skies, very minimal light pollution. But they often, the Veil Nebula does show up very well in astrophotography. So he took this from Mercury, which is in Northants of the UK. He used a 200mm Orion telescope, and with a DSLR camera on it again, and he used 30 60-second subs at ISO 1000. So he didn't auto guide on this, so he's got a really good mount with some good tracking on there to get an image like this. And you can see the different colours coming through there. You've got some blues, you've got some reds, which shows the different types of gases that are present in this supernova remnant. Really nice object to image. And I think we're going to finish off here as well. I thought I'd pop my image in here of a different part of the Veil Nebula. The Veil Nebula is quite a large object in the sky, and it's made up of the Eastern Veil, and I think the image I took is the Western Veil, which is also known as the Witch's Broom Nebula. You can see from the shape of it, it looks a bit like a broom that Harry Potter might use. So, and also you can see here we've still got the similar sort of colours. Got some blues, which I believe is made by oxygen, I think, and the reds, which is the hydrogen that's present there in this supernova remnant. So I hope you enjoyed this Skyguide again this month, and you find it useful, and you can get out there and see some of these objects I've highlighted, particularly the planets. If you fancy a planetary challenge, it may be possible to see just about all the planets all in one session this month. So if you do, go onto our Facebook page, or comment and let me know how you got on, or even share some images that I can maybe include next month. So okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next month. Thank you.